I think horror is very queer in so many different ways.
How did writing that reshape the way you understand fear? And how did those same themes bleed into the films that you make and the work that you do?
The tagline of the film is "There's no safe spaces." And even within what's supposed to be a safe space for us, there's still danger. I've gone through experiences with this, like I've experienced microaggressions on hookup apps or dating apps or social apps. I've experienced people utilizing location to find where you live.
Theoretically, if you hosted a dinner party inspired by Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which 3 horror icons are coming over and who's not making it to dessert?
Yeah, I think I would choose filmmakers, and I think I would love to have...
Welcome to the Queerest Podcast, your cosmic guide to the queer universe. Hosted by Andraé BVR, each episode takes you on an interstellar journey through queer culture, identity, and influence. From dismantling media tropes to exploring queer representation, we invite you to challenge norms and expand your horizons. So buckle up and set your phasers to fabulous. Close encounters of the queerest kind await.
Greetings, cosmic queers and creatures of the night. I am your host, Andraé BVR, and this is the Queerest Podcast, your cosmic guide through the ever-expanding universe of queer culture, identity, and influence. Tonight's question: what makes horror so queer? From coded monsters to scream queens reclaiming their crowns, horror has always reflected queerness. From the masks to the transformations to the art of surviving the unthinkable in heels. To help us unpack that, I am joined by writer-director Amir Moini, creator of the award-winning short Slashr, and a filmmaker who proves that what scares us could actually also set us free. So here's how we're charting today's course. First, an incoming transmission, Horror Edition, where we'll explore why queerness and horror have always shared the same pulse, and sometimes the same wardrobe. And then we'll jump into a deep space dive with Amir to uncover how fear becomes creative power. And finally, the final frontier, a rapid-fire round where slasher trivia meets camp confessions. So dim the lights, cue the fog, and let's see what crawls out from the dark. You are now tuned in to the incoming transmission, Horror Edition, where queerness and horror meet under one flickering light bulb and everyone's eyeliner survives the final act. Maybe. Horror has always been a little queer. The monsters, the metaphors, the melodrama, it's camp, but with a body count. Take Frankenstein, a man so obsessed with another man's body, he literally built it himself. Straight culture calls that science, we call it Tuesday. And then there's A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, a movie that said, what if being possessed by a killer is just code for coming out? Spoiler alert, it was. Or The Babadook, our grieved demon turned queer roommate, uninvited, dramatic, still hasn't paid rent, and loves a statement hat. Or Jennifer's Body, which gave us bisexual revenge in lip gloss and chaos. And Scream, which reminded us that survival is just performance art with better lighting. Horror has always been our mirror, dramatic, misunderstood, and perpetually glowing in low light. The monsters were never the enemy. It was us before therapy. So tonight, we're heading into the shadows with a filmmaker who knows that fear isn't just entertainment, it's a revelation. Let's descend into the darkness for our deep space dive. Amir Moini is an award-winning horror writer and director who turned fear into something both chilling and deeply human. Originally from Boston, he began his career in storytelling before stepping behind the camera to create Slashr, a slick, subversive queer horror short that premiered at Screamfest 2023 and went on to play more than 25 festivals across 12 countries, winning 8 awards along the way. He's a graduate of Ryan Murphy's Half Initiative, a board member of Outfest, and a rising voice redefining queer horror with intelligence, style, and bite. Welcome to the Queerest Podcast, Amir.
Thank you. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining. So let's kind of just start off with your origin story. You've gone from Boston to Los Angeles, from shaping global storytelling to creating your own cinematic world. What drew you to storytelling in the first place, and when did that passion start evolving into horror specifically?
Yeah, I think, from a very young age, I was always making films. My dad gave me this very old used video camera that he had in the basement. He was gonna, I think, toss it, and he asked if I wanted it. I was probably 7 years old, and I think just having access to that and seeing, like what types of stories you could tell, it just morphed into all of us writing horror movie scripts, shooting horror movies when we were in third, fourth, fifth grade, all the way up to like middle school. And we probably made 8 or 9 films, like feature films.
Ooh.
And it was fun. So I think as a kid, I was always, telling stories or making horror movies, and everything I've done with work, there's always been a storytelling component to it. Like even during my time at Netflix, I was leading a function called employer branding and doing a lot of video editorial content for their social media, for LinkedIn, but it was really to highlight and humanize the stories of executives and why they did the work that they did, or do interviews of cast members of shows. And I think I always wanted to kind of shine a light on like people's paths and people's journeys. And yeah, so I think whether it was the horror movies as a kid or a lot of the video editorial work in my corporate career, I find that storytelling has always been sort of the through line of that.
I love that. And just curious, will we ever see those original films that you've created?
I don't know. Maybe, maybe one day if I could like do a screening of one of those at New Bev, like that would be the dream. But
That
midnight
would be
screening.
cool.
But we
That's-
didn't have I didn't know how to edit, so
Mhm.
we would stop the camera and then like run around to the other side and then restart it. So all the editing
Yeah,
was done actually in the shooting. Um,
nice.
so there was no actual editing. It was just like like there were scenes that were 20 minutes long with no breaks, and we just kept going. And so when I say feature, I'm very generous in that word. It's more like a run-on short that has no editor.
I love that. And just because I'm curious, what was like one of the stories about? Or what was
Uh,
your favorite, I guess? What was
oh
your favorite?
God.
Let me put it that way.
Okay, we did one. Jesus, we did one called Evil. I can't even with these. It was called Evil of Darkness, and it was about a woman named Kim Tricker who was being stalked by her brother Tommy Tricker. It was
Ooh.
very Halloween coded. It was basically the same exact thing, and I think all we really wanted to do were just like crazy 30-minute chase and fight sequences, and we were really
Yeah.
fighting. Like I think me and all my cousins were super into like wrestling and like other Jackass and other things. So we
Yeah.
were actually like jumping off, porches and like tackling each other and like really getting hurt in the process. So some of the scenes actually kind of look great. It's like, oh wow, like, because it's real. We were actually doing all those things. Couple broken bones, couple scars, but like amongst all of us.
Dang.
But we did it for the art, so to
That's
speak.
we love it. We love it doing it for the art. That's so good. So quickly transitioning, you are also not only a storyteller, a filmmaker, a communications professional, you are an author, which is amazing. And your book, 22 Lessons by Someone More Up Than You,
Yeah.
you're brutally honest about shame, anxiety, rebuilding a life that felt like your own. How did writing that reshape the way you understand fear, and how did those same themes bleed into the films that you make and the work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really just I wrote that during COVID. I think that, being a Capricorn, that was my COVID project. I was like, I'm gonna just write a book and publish it. And it's something I'd always wanted to do. I don't consider myself an author. I think that was more of a creative hobby project. Like I don't know if I would ever write something again. But I do think it was an opportunity to hold a mirror up to myself and just be really honest about, reflecting on really hard experiences I'd gone through and processing those in a creative way. And I think filmmaking
Yeah.
is the same. I think, whenever I'm making some sort of project, I do think of my personal life experiences and how it could feed into that. And I do think when you create films, you are processing maybe traumatic or difficult things you've gone through in a more creative format. So there were a lot of parallels to writing the book as well as making my short and other things. Yeah.
Love that. And just kind of tapping a little bit into the writing of it. So like when you decided to write this book, like how did you kind of go about like deciding what those life lessons were, like what you wanted to discuss? Like what was that process for you, especially during COVID when like we're all at home and like we have a lot of alone time, to kind of dissect these type of topics and ideas.
Yeah. I mean, I tried to write a book 2 times before that, and both times it just like didn't go anywhere. I think I wrote like 30 pages each time and then it just sat there. So it was almost like a Frankenstein book in a way. I was repurposing the 2 times that I tried to do this, as well as a lot of the poetry and journal entries from my actual journal, and then added a couple other topics. And it was almost like assembling a lot of things that I'd already written.
Right.
And it was 22 just because there were 22 things I had to talk about. Like it could have been 20, it could have been, there was no significance
Right.
to the number. It just capped out at
Right.
22. But I wrote it when I was 30, and it felt like a reflection of my 20s, which was really nice. And I think, I would write about some of the hard things I went through when I was maybe like 22 or 23. And I think I was so hard on myself at that time. And to be older, I'm 36 now, but when I wrote it, I was like, wow, like I was so hard on myself, but I really was such a baby at the time. And I maybe should have given myself more grace for being so young
Yeah.
with what I was going through. Or I thought I healed from this, but actually by writing this, I'm not, and I'm unsurfacing deeper layers of feelings and grief and resentment or whatever it might be that like need to be healed further. So it was a very cathartic experience for me to write it. And maybe I write a book a decade. Maybe when I'm 40, I write about my 30s and so forth.
I love that. I think that's really just, it's great to be able to like process kind of like those experiences and also just kind of like impart your wisdom and those experiences onto others so that they can kind of learn from those moments in your life that may have been more difficult to deal with. And I think that's just really a good use of creating art and you processing kind of those experiences. So I think that's really cool. And one more thing on that, like, what was the reception to you publishing this book to like friends, family, like the community around you?
It was really positive. I mean, I talk about very personal things in the book, so obviously there were certain people I had to get their, approval or their blessing on releasing it. I think overall there were like every person resonated with a different chapter based on something they had gone through in their life. So, I didn't write a book thinking like I have my shit together and I'm this wise person where like, this is worthy of people's time. I think I wrote it more like, here are my life experiences, and if anything helps, great. Like I kind of did it for myself, but if it can help someone else too, then like that's the point. And yeah, I think I'm very more glass half empty than glass half full. And I think a lot of like self-improvement books are too optimistic for me, where I get very frustrated. So that I wrote it in a more cynical way where it was like hopefully more relatable, where it's like I'm not this like put together person. Like I struggle with things too, and this is how I made it through.
Yeah, but I think that's the type of stuff I think people want to see more. They want that authenticity. And it's like the reality is like you're saying, it's like a lot of those self-help books kind of those people come from like this like pseudo position of authority that they've have their everything together. And it's like the reality is like we're all kind of figuring it out. Like if anybody says they're an expert at anything, it's like I'm always a little suspicious of that because it's like we're all a work in progress and it's about
Yeah,
just like taking in these experiences, learning from them and growing from them if those people have the capacity to grow from those experiences. You know what I mean?
totally. Yeah, for sure.
So I want to kind of pivot a little bit to kind of talk about Hollywood, horror, and like your day job. And you've lived on both sides of the industry, both the creative and the corporate side. What has that taught you about the power of storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, I think I understand both sides of the coin, I think, by working in the corporate space, but also like thriving or living in the creative space as well. So I think for me, it's understanding the emotions that go into the creative work while understanding the pragmatic business that goes into the corporate, and knowing like that those two things can coexist or clash or live together harmoniously. It just depends on the situation. So I think it just allows me to have like a bigger 360 view of like the whole industry. And whether I'm on the corporate side working with creatives, it's like I know how to talk their language, or I'm a creative working with corporate executives, I know how to talk that language. So I'm very fortunate and grateful that I've been on both sides, that I, can kind of adapt and tailor based on like who the audience is, and understand like certain reasons that maybe other people don't. And I think I'm able to look at my work in a very, again, like I would describe myself as very pragmatic a lot of times. And I don't get super emotionally invested in certain things unless like it's like the absolute, like there's a couple hills I'm willing to die on and that's it. But it's like pick your hills wisely, essentially. Not every
Love
hill.
that. Yeah, no, I think that's good. That's good advice, I think, especially for creatives, because it's like for those who do art as a profession or as a serious hobby, it's like you put a lot of your energy and your emotion and a lot of passion into projects. And sometimes like, if a creative's working with a corporate, executive or something like that, and like they get, really intense feedback or something like that, like they may take that feedback a little bit more personal than they sometimes need to, kind of thing, and not able to divorce themselves of like the creative is not them as a person. So it's not like a personal attack kind of thing. So I think it's really wise of you to be able to like have that full understanding and also be able to like be really just aware of like what the whole system looks like as a whole too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And understanding that, those corporate executives also have managers and bosses and KPIs and goals. And a lot of times like what they're telling you is maybe more directed from other sources, and a lot of it is
Right.
out of their hands too. And you just have to find a way to, if there is tension, to find like the best idea where both sides are happy with it. But it's a good opportunity to kind of like turn over rocks and see if there's something better that both of you haven't thought about. I always say that the best ideas win from like tension. So
Yeah. No,
I kind
that's
of like
true.
those creative debates, and I don't get threatened by them, I would say.
That's good. That's really, yeah, and I think that's really important. It's like with I have a lot of friends who obviously work in the creative field, and sometimes they're not able to take kind of that creative feedback. But I think like to your point, it's like to be able to create something better from attention as it pertains to like feedback. It's like you're able to create something even better potentially by taking that feedback, applying it, or even just exploring what that feedback is to then consider it or not consider it type of thing. But I think that's really important just in the creative process, especially within this like ecosystem that is Hollywood. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
definitely.
So I want to kind of pivot now a little bit to your work as a filmmaker. Again, you created this award-winning short film, Slashr. I've watched it. It was fantastic, by the way. Like
Thank you.
the tension, I love the queerness of it. I thought it was just so well done. The film really, uses breakup, it uses a hookup app, a killer who weaponizes intimacy to say something bigger than the scares. Under all the tension, what were you really trying to explore about queerness, vulnerability, or the risk we take when we let strangers into our world?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many layers to this film. I obviously on the surface it's stranger danger, but that's like the most simplistic version of it. And
Right.
I would say, really it's like there's two things. I would say one, it's about the juxtaposition of technology being isolating and community building at the same time. Like this character, he is alone through the whole film, but he's constantly inundated with text messages and voice memos and app messages. So it kind of shows like he is surrounded by things, but they're quite empty in some way. And really he's
Right.
alone and lonely and like seeking companionship or acceptance or community, and not finding those things in the spaces that he's in. And then the other piece of it is just really like where we're at in our society when it comes to LGBTQ safety. Like the tagline of the film is there's no safe spaces. And even within what's supposed to be a safe space for us, there's still danger. And, what happens when you commodify like sexuality and danger together in certain scenarios. So I think there's a lot of the queer experience that's reflected in this in different ways. But yeah, I would say like those are kind of the main components to the film.
Yeah, and I'm just curious, like, what inspired you to create that specific film too? Because I think it was so like, first of all, it needs to be a feature film first and foremost. But second, I just feel like the way the storytelling was, the tension that was building, just all it felt very timely. It felt very relevant to like the queer experience in today, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm like, what inspired you to create it in the first place?
Okay, so two sides. Like, obviously, I felt there was a story to be told and creatively wanted to do that. Business wise, I was like, I need a short film because it's like a business card. So when you have
Right,
meetings and
right,
they say, like, I want to see your work, it's like you have something to show them. So I knew
right,
I
right,
had to
right.
make a short film in order to start my directing career. And I knew this was a story I wanted to tell. And I really wanted to make almost like a intro opening kill scene to a feature. Like
Mhm.
it ends
Yep.
kind of abruptly, and I wouldn't say there's a bow on it. It ends kind of nihilistically as well. And
Right.
I think like all of those were kind of intentional just to show like this could be the first 10 minutes of a film and there's like more room to grow. We are working on a feature of it, although I will say it's a very different universe, it's a very different plot, there's more characters, so it's
Yep.
loosely based on the foundation of Slasher, but totally different. So more to come with that. Um
It's exciting.
yeah, it's very exciting. But yeah, I think I've gone through experiences with this, you know, like I've experienced microaggressions on hookup apps or dating apps or social apps. I've experienced people utilizing location to like find where you live, you know, like it's
Mhm.
especially if you're in an area that's not densely populated, like there's been some like weird situations. So I think I've just been like reflective of like how people show up in that space versus real life and what the implications are of that. So yeah, I think it's a relatable experience for a lot of queer people. And it just felt like it was the right time to tell it. And it's also such a catalyst to be inspired by films like When a Stranger Calls. You know, I think the calls coming
Yes.
from inside the house, that was kind of like when Cindy is saying, like, you know, she saw someone walking through the basement on the Nest cams. It's the same vibe of like it's coming from within, so to speak. So I think this plot device was a way to kind of embody the films that inspired me as well.
I love that. Yeah, no, I totally and I think it was like I think what really made it really scary, I think for me specifically, was just like the realness of it. Like it felt like again timely, but it also felt like it's all within the realm of possibility. And I always find like horror films that have like that element of like realness
Hmm.
always a little bit more scary. Like, there's the Jason Voorhees, the Freddy Kruegers, like they're scary, it's fun, but it's like it's still grounded enough that like it's not as real. Whereas like somebody could use your location, somebody could be messaging you, and like there are many horror stories, like real life ones, where that has happened. You know what I mean? I think there was
Totally.
a grinder serial killer type of thing, and again, our community is always the enemy of a lot of other people. Unfortunately,
Hmm.
do you know what I mean? And so it felt very grounded in that regard, and I'm glad to hear that there is going to be a feature film because it deserves one. Because the tension of that was fire. So great
Thank
work
you.
and great job to the entire team for that. It was really fun.
Thank you. I mean, I'm very harsh on myself. Like I would give that film a B minus in terms of my execution on it, but that being said, like it was essentially my film school. That was my first film. I learned so much along the process. There's things I would do differently in hindsight now that I'm more experienced, but I'm
Right,
excited to
right, right,
kind of
right.
take all those learnings and apply it to my future projects, and I'm very happy with it. It feels like a time capsule of, you know, just like me entering the space and going for it. And I think that was honestly like the hardest part was to just take that leap and try. But yeah, we did it, and I'm very proud of everyone's work. So yeah, I think it's just like on to new things.
Yeah. No, I think it was well worth it. It's like making any piece of art is always so vulnerable, and especially like a film, a horror film specifically, it's like it's such a really unique genre that like to be able to actually create and evoke a sense of fear and make people feel uneasy, I think is a skill that I don't think all filmmakers have or are able to do successfully. And I think you and your team were able to do that really successfully. And so I'm excited to see the
Thank
future
you.
film. So please keep me posted.
Yeah, I will.
On the same vein of queer horror as a home, you are obviously a lifelong horror fan. What is it about the genre that feels so naturally queer to you? And were there moments, a film, a scene, a monster that made you feel seen before kind of Hollywood caught up?
Yeah, I think horror is very queer in so many different ways. So I think I've watched horror movies since I was probably like 6, and like probably things I should not have been seeing. But I
Right.
think of shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, it's a huge metaphor of being you're the chosen one, you have to keep it a secret. It alienates you from friends and family. I mean, there's so many metaphors of her being like closeted and queer, essentially.
Yes.
But it's a
Yes.
gift at the same time. And I think of movies like Nightbreed by Clive Barker, where the all the kind of villains in it or the monsters are like these misfits and they're misunderstood. And yeah, so like there's so many films that I think tie to queer identity and queer experiences that are very relatable. And I think that's why it always spoke to me. I think like growing up, I was kind of an outcast or a misfit. I didn't have like a lot of like close friends until like high school maybe.
Right.
And so I think horror movies really like filled that gap in a way. Like it allowed me to be seen and understood in different ways. And yeah, so and there's plugging a documentary series called Queer for Fear that exists that kind of dives more deeply into queer representation throughout horror, all the way from like Bram Stoker to present day. And I think it's like super interesting just to see that trajectory as well.
Yes. I saw that one too. Our friend Mr. Alonso Duralde is actually in that, which is really
Nice.
exciting. He is one of the former Outfest programmer who is one of the people that is in the documentary. So check that out, folks who have not seen it. But just kind of tapping into this further, what was like the first horror movie I think that what was the first horror movie that you saw? If you can remember that. Or maybe how about this? What was the first horror film that made you feel like it was a genre that made you fall in love with it, I guess?
I mean, I think the very first horror movie that I saw was a movie called Dolls from 1988, and it's terrifying. It's like it gave me nightmares forever. But I think the film that made me fall in love with the genre was definitely Scream. I I was 7 years old when it came out, and I remember I don't know, I have this like specific memory. I remember I was like eating raspberries on like a paper towel watching it, and I remember the raspberries like looked like blood on the towel, and I was
Yes.
watching the blood. Like it was such a like vivid memory of this, but that does not matter to this. But I was watching it and I just remember like loving Sydney Prescott and really identifying with her. And I think a lot of queer men in particular love like kick-ass female characters, whether it's like Buffy or
Yep.
Xena or Catwoman. So I think like Sydney became like in that mix for me. And I loved it. I felt like it was sexy and edgy and I loved the chase sequences. And that really was the film that kind of like made me fall in love with the genre, I would say.
Love Scream so freaking much, truly. And I'm
Yeah.
excited for the new one coming out soon. So
Yeah.
cannot wait. And so now kind of pivoting to your next chapter in your career, you've built a career that's equal parts passion, resilience, and reinvention. So what's haunting you next? Like what stories do you still want to tell that the horror world hasn't seen yet?
I mean, I think it's not just like what stories do I want to tell, but also where do I want to flex creatively. I think for me, like I love giallo cinema, which is 70s inspired, kind of like Italian horror, like a lot of like Dario Argento and Fulci. And so I think I'd love to experiment with something within that subgenre. I think that would be really fun and just trying something new. And I also think, making this queer feature of Slashr where it's very like 90s nostalgic and it kind of embodies all those films that we grew up with and like encapsulate a lot of our identity around, but it was never really for us. Like it there
Right.
wasn't a lot of queer representation in these movies, but I would love to create a film where it is about us and it is for us, but it captures the magic of those films of the late 90s. So I think the story, it's less of the story I have to tell and more of the experience I have to give to people. Like
Yep.
I want new generations to like have that magic that I felt with Scream, but this time it's actually like about them being queer and they see themselves represented in it as opposed to like grasping for straws as to where they can identify within the film. So that's kind of like my main goal. I'm really limiting myself to a few projects and staying dedicated and focused to those. I think those are probably my main two at the moment.
That makes sense. That's smart. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that if that alone is plenty, truly, and it's like, especially if you're going to, give all of your energy and time to it, it's going to be really masterful, especially considering how amazingly successful a Slasher was. So excited to see that. And this concludes the Deep Space Dive. All right, Amir, this is the final frontier, our rapid fire round where fear meets fun, answer fast, or risk becoming the sequel. So question number one is, here's Johnny, The Shining. Every frame of The Shining feels cold and haunted. From a director's standpoint, what makes that movie so visually unsettling? And what lessons do you take from it from building tension and dread in your own filmmaking?
I love the tracking shots. I think, when you're following the young boy as he's on the bicycle going around the corners, it's like you're kind of with him, like you don't know what to expect. So I think those tracking shots create such a tension that I definitely would like to incorporate those into my work.
Yeah, I do. I will say that movie is fantastic. I did also like Doctor Sleep, the sequel. How did you feel
I
about
liked it
that as
too.
a quick
I
follow?
thought it was
Right?
great.
That was
Yeah.
so good. Okay, good. I'm not alone. The next question I have for you is Boogeyman energy. So Halloween essentially invented the modern slasher formula. Why do you think that template still works? And what do you think queer filmmakers like yourself, how they can reinvent it today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it works because I think there's something fun and familiar with it, and I think by reinventing it, it's doing the same thing but different. Like, how do you add a twist to it? So, I think
Right.
with me, for example, it's like by making it in a queer space with queer stories or what it is. But I think it's like the chase sequences. I think it's the escapism. I think it's the, character development and character friendships and bonds with each other. Like there's so many pieces, like having red herrings of like almost they're all kind of like mystery coded. You're trying to
Right.
figure out like who the killer is and why. And then there's always that big monologue reveal at the end of like why they did it. So the
Yeah.
structure is very similar, but I think the fun part is how do you interpret that structure differently in a creative way?
Right. And of the Halloween franchise, do you have a personal favorite?
I mean, other than the original, I love H2O. I think it's amazing.
H was
A lot
so
of like
good.
some people have different opinions, but I just think it's so good. Like I love the cast, I love the structure of it. I think the chase scenes are amazing. It just fits into that like late 90s vibe that I'm like obsessed with. So
Yeah. And I love, 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 love the ending. And then I like how they switched it up in the next film where it's like what
mhm.
happened in the ending kind of got like retconned or whatever. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know. But it was just the fear, especially that opening scene too, now that I'm thinking about it, the opening scene with like the skates, that like is
Yeah.
cemented in my mind. Like I
With
cannot
Joseph
not think,
Gordon-Levitt.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Iconic, truly. The next question I have for you is dinner at the Chainsaw House. So, theoretically, if you hosted a dinner party inspired by Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which three horror icons are coming over and who's not making it to dessert? And this could be characters, filmmakers, whatever you want to invite to this party.
Yeah, I think I would choose filmmakers, and I think I would love to have Wes Craven, John
Yeah.
Carpenter, and probably Clive Barker. I think that would be a really interesting dinner. I would like all of them to make it to dessert. Like
Good.
that would be the hope.
Exactly. I
Uh,
love that.
but I think that
Very
would
good
be
choices.
so, they're definitely some of my people directors that I look up to very much.
No, truly iconic film directors of horror. Like they really have inspired so many like artists and all the work that they've done has been just so amazing and iconic, truly. Next question I have for you is If you were given a huge budget to remake your dream horror film, what's the franchise and who is your dream scream queen or king to star in it?
Oh goodness. Oh my God, there's so many that I would do this with. I think I would love to remake Society. It's a film from,
Ooh,
I mean, it has a weird year because it was released globally in one year and then the US in another year, but like late 80s, early 90s,
right.
directed by Brian Usna. And I just think, body horror is obviously in right now, and like hot, and beauty horror is an interesting subgenre of body horror. And I just think like prosthetics and, steering away from CGI gore and really leaning into the craft of like prosthetic gore and special effects would be really cool and fun. In terms of cast, I don't know. I'm not gonna make it to the sequel. Let's think of something. I mean, I love Mia Goth. I think she's amazing.
Oh, yes, she is.
I just love everything that she does. I love Jenna Ortega. Yeah, like I think like definitely like one of those two people would be interesting for sure. But definitely Society. That would be really fun.
I love that. Those are great choices. And then the last question I have for the Final Frontier, if Ghostface called you right now and asked, what's your favorite scary movie? What's your answer and why?
I would probably say The Shining. And again, for all the reasons that we talked about, the atmospheric tension, the cast, the filmmaking abilities by Kubrick, and just the amazing cinematography. It's just such a amazing spectacle of a film that is timeless. And I think like it's just one of the best, and it's genuinely very scary. So
I totally agree. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. You survived the Final Frontier Horror Edition.
Thank
Consider
you.
yourself the final boy of the episode.
Woo.
Amir, exactly. Amir, thank you again so much for joining us for the Queerest Podcast, for reminding us that horror isn't just about what hides in the dark. It's what we find when we stop running from it. For queer people, fear and visibility have always been intertwined. We grew identifying with the monster, only to realize that the monster was never really the villain. It was just misunderstood, powerful, and a little too fabulous for its time. That's the true beauty of horror. It lets us look straight at the things we've been told to bury and turn them into art, survival, and sometimes a killer outfit. So today's cosmic key takeaway is fear does not make you weak, it makes you alive. The shadows don't hide your light, they just make it easier to see it. So until next time, again, thank you, Amir.
Thank you.
Until next time, stay curious.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Queerest Podcast. Thank you for joining us on this cosmic journey through the queer universe. If today's conversation resonated with you, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with your chosen family. Your voice helps grow the queerest community. Until next time, stay curious.